The planet looked completely ordinary, a boring stone spheroid orbiting around a forgotten star that didn't even have a name. In addition, there were 5 other planets in the system, a gas giant, and 4 sisters of the one the 3 people in the spaceship's cabin were looking at. "Why the hell did we come here?" asked Machado, a tall, swarthy man in his 40s, with an unexpectedly sharp look from under what looked like sleepy, half-closed eyelids. "It's useless. It probably doesn't even have bacteria, let alone normal life." "I agree," Li Tang said. His face was unreadable, as usual, but his voice had the same notes of frustration and doubt as Machado's. "We wasted a lot of time and burned a lot of fuel. For what? I wish we'd taken that freight from the Maxul. The Sulpadians pay a decent fee to deliver larvae to new worlds. It's not big money and boring, but at least it covers the expenses." Aneta Saarinen didn't answer. Her ability to keep a stony expression on her face was even better than Li Tang's, trained by her vast experience as captain and owner of the free merchant ship. A Shanadian destroyer demilitarized and rebuilt as a multi-purpose transport was inherited by Aneta from a distant relative she had never heard of before his death. According to rumors, the relative was monstrously rich and endowed a significant fraction of his fortune to the numerous heirs, who immediately began a massive fight for shares. Aneta didn't get involved in the battle, but simply took the ship that nobody was interested in, quit the patrol, and spent her severance pay to equip the Hustler with everything necessary for independent merchant activity. Unfortunately, it was impossible to handle even a demilitarized destroyer alone. Therefore, she had to put up with these 2 types. Machado, Aneta always forgot whether it was his first or last name, was an experienced pilot with a military background, though not retired, but dishonorably discharged for some fraud. Like any swindler, he was an excellent supply man and could sell anything. She just had to keep a close eye on him, just in case. Li Tang, a scholar of several disciplines, evaluated potential loot and could see the profit in any trash. Aneta sighed and brushed a strand of graying hair off her forehead. The need to have a crew could be extremely tedious. "I intercepted a message," she said, "from old Morstead to his buddy, Samuel Veselov." Li Tang and Machado nodded. Both elderly merchants were well known throughout the free space community. He'd been expressing himself profusely, of course, but it was clear that Morstead had found something exciting. Here, on this stupid planet. "Maybe he did," Li Tang said. "But Morstead disappeared 2 months ago. And Veselov too. What if it's happened here on this very planet?" Aneta stood up resolutely. "That's what we'll find out," she said, in a tone that tolerated no objection. "The ship is mine. I'm paying you, not the other way around, so it's up to me to decide." She looked at the image of the planet on the scanner screen. "We're still a few hours away from entering orbit. I'll be in my quarters. Let me know when you will be ready for landing." She turned abruptly and left the control room. "I still don't understand what we're looking for here," Machado said. "It's clearly a flop." Li Tang sat manipulating the various hollow projections of planet data that flashed in front of his face at such a speed that Machado didn't even try to read anything. The researcher didn't respond to Machado's retort. The pilot, however, made a second move, this time with a direct question that would be harder for Li Tang to ignore. "So, what do you have there? Anything interesting?" Li shrugged his shoulders. "Nothing special. There are slight deviations in gravitational readings, the magnetic field, and other things. But everything in general is minor, within the margin of error." In one swift gesture, he minimized all hollow projections. "But you know, I'm going to have to agree with the Valkyrie. That's what they used to call their captain. We should check it out." Machado snorted doubtfully. "The 3 of us checking an entire planet without knowing what we're looking for would take until the universe freezes out." Morstead never says anything for nothing. Never did, Machado corrected. Li Tang wrinkled his nose slightly. The old man's only been missing a couple months. I don't think it's wise to bury him just like that. Wise? Unwise? Who cares about the old geezer? Maybe he just lost his mind and directed his rusty flying bucket into some star. Li Tang didn't answer, and Machado asked with obvious irritation, I don't get it. Why the heck are you defending him with such zeal? Did he bequeath his favorite underwear to you? Instead of answering, Li Tang displayed an image on the control room's main screen. It was a scan of a large area of the planet's surface, on which a bright orange dot stood out against the gray background. Call the captain, he said. It's a hyperbeacon signal. I'll check it out, but it looks a lot like Morstead's ship. The Undine looked perfectly intact. It had previously been a medium-range clipper for transporting crystal mushrooms from Electra. Despite significant refurbishment, the Undine still gave the impression of a ship built for speed. Clippers became unnecessary when prospectors had wiped out almost all of Electra's mushrooms, and scientists had learned to grow crystal mushrooms on an industrial scale. Morstead bought the Undine for next to nothing and adapted it to his needs. He downgraded the engines a bit, increased the volume of the cargo bays, and added some fuel tanks to increase the range. The Undine now stood on a table-like plateau, which was as unattractive as any other similar plateau on a planet devoid of life. She appeared in perfect order, but was not responding to radio requests. Only the hyperbeacon was sending its pulses into space. Annetta landed the Hustler a few clicks away from Morstead's ship. Machado tried to whine about the unnecessary rough ride in the cramped crawler, but even he realized that until it was clear what had happened to Morstead, it was better to be safe than sorry. So he and Li Tang loaded the crawler with their gear and set off toward Undine slowly enough to not feel like laundry in a washing machine. The plateau was flat, but quite rocky. Li Tang lowered the binoculars and drummed his fingers thoughtfully on the dashboard of the crawler. She looks all right, he said. But something is definitely off. Machado shrugged. How old was he? Maybe he just flew here to die in a quiet place. I've heard some animals do that. Okay, I'll shut up, he said in response to Li Tang's furious glare. I can't even make a joke. Are we just going to sit here, or will we take a closer look? With a shake of his head, Li Tang moved off. The vehicle slowly crawled around the ship, swaying on the rocks and potholes. The men tensely scrutinized the Undine, wanting both to discover the reasons for her owner's mysterious silence, and that there were no such reasons. As they rounded the stern and saw the starboard side of the ship for the first time, Machado involuntarily burst out, "Oh, hell!" The gangway was lowered and the airlock hatches were open. Both hatches. Half an hour later, they were still arguing. Well, we can't take that risk, Li Tang insisted. We still have no idea what could have happened in there. Morstead and Veselov are missing. The ship is wide open. We have to find out what's going on first. You won't find out a damn thing until you see for yourself, said Machado, who was beginning to tire of the bickering. And if you're afraid, just take a blaster with you. Just don't shoot me, smartass. Quiet, Annetta barked. She remained on the Hustler and followed the events via video link. Lee, I partially share your concern, but either we take some decisive action right now, or leave and notify the nearest patrol base. There is no strict law on this, though. Of course, the patrol would like to be the all-over-everything. However, let me remind you that we would then lose the right to the prize money if it turns out that the ship's owners are dead. That last remark settled the argument, The crew of the Hustler was one step away from bankruptcy. "We should have at least sent a drone up there," said Machado, who, for all his zeal, was suddenly reluctant to go aboard the Undine. "That's exactly what we would have done," replied Li Tang. "If someone hadn't burned up all our drones trying to find the mythical city of the precursors in the lava belt of Hephaestus." Machado opened his mouth but looked at the screen where Annetta was staring at him menacingly and kept silent, checking the blaster's charge and lowering the weapon into the suit's hip holster. "If you see anything suspicious, come right back," Li Tang told him in a completely different tone of voice, which was clearly and unexpectedly friendly. "No heroic shit." "I'll do my best," Machado mumbled embarrassedly and closed his helmet. "Machado will come aboard the Undine and look around. If it will be safe, then you will join him," Annetta said. "Okay? And be careful out there." Machado only waved his hand and silently closed the hatch of the crawler's cramped airlock behind him. As soon as Machado stepped through the open airlock of the Undine, the video image from the helmet-mounted camera on his spacesuit disappeared. Li Tang fiddled with the equipment, then waved his hands, a gesture that looked amusingly theatrical on the screen in the control room. "I can't help it. The Undine's hull doesn't let the signal through. It's weird, but that's it. At least the radio communication works. We'll have to go with this." Meanwhile, Machado commented on what he had seen. "The tech room is empty and quiet. All the tools and instruments are in their places, no clutter. It didn't look like the ship had been abandoned in a hurry." He was silent momentarily, a vague noise coming from the speaker. "I looked in the weapons locker. Everything's in place. There is no power in the ship's systems, and the switches are not working. Moving on." Corridor by corridor, compartment by compartment, Machado went around the ship and found nothing. It seemed as if the owner of the Undine and his friend, if he was also on the ship of course, had simply walked out without closing the door behind them and never returned. On foot, because the crawler was also parked at its dock, fully fueled and ready to leave. Annetta thought that maybe they should check the area around the ship for bodies, as sad as it felt. She listened again to the conversations between Machado and Li Tang, who already joined him. They were now advancing on two different sides of the circular corridor, intending to meet at the main control room of the Undine. "Where are Morsted's and Vasilov's quarters?" Machado asked. "We'd better take a look, though it doesn't look like anyone ever lived here. On clipper ships, the captain's and assistant captain's quarters connect directly to the main controls room," Annetta said. There were usually 8 or 10 people on a clipper, but it was possible to run the ship alone. That was what appealed to Morsted. "It's a little dusty in here," said Li Tang's voice. It seemed that Morsted wasn't too obsessive with cleaning, and... He paused. "Strange. The closer you get to the main controls, the dirtier it gets. It should be the other way around." "Same shit here," Machado said, "and the walls look like they're covered with some sort of moss. It's the first time I've ever seen a ship in such a condition. Even when I was serving on the Falcane and we were taking refugees out of Beta Station, it wasn't this filthy... Whoa! I got to the main controls. It's closed. What's up on your side?" "Approaching. It's closed too, and the power's out. What do we do, Captain?" Annetta has given the situation some quick thought. No answers had been found yet, but from the looks of it, the Undine was now a dead piece of metal standing on a dead planet. Annetta did not see any apparent danger, and it might be possible to restore the ship's power supply from the main cabin, at least at the level of the emergency system. Then, they can look at the logbook entries and find some information. There's a way to open the blast doors manually on the clippers. There should be a small hatch in the wall somewhere to the side of the door, with a manual drive handle behind it. A pause. Then Machado's voice. "Got it. Lee, look at the waste level. There's also an indicator panel, but it's not lit right now. Damn, it's tight. Oh, here we go. I'm going into the control room. Let's see what we have here. Man, that's a lot of dust. How did they live here in such a pigsty? It can't have accumulated in a couple of months behind closed doors. Oh, crap. Machado's voice had changed from its usual cocky bravado. The pilot was clearly stunned and frightened. What is it? Annetta asked anxiously. Lee, can you see them? Apparently, Lee Tang had also managed the cabin hatch on his side and joined Machado. Do you see? Yes. Even Lee Tang's usually impassive voice trembled. I can see them clearly. What's going on down there? Annetta demanded. Did you find Morstead and Veselov? I think so, replied Lee Tang. We can't see their faces, but it must be them. Don't touch them, he said to Machado. Just turn the chair around gently. Ooh. Annetta had never heard so much emotion in her assistant's voice before. What? She managed to say. It was silent for a while. Only Machado mumbled something that sounded like a curse. Morstead just crumbled to dust, Lee Tang said. Just a pile of gray dust. We'll try not to touch Veselov, though he's already partially crumbled. I'll see if I can't power up the ship's main energy system. Annetta felt a wave of very unpleasant feelings come over her, from despair to anxiety, and a premonition of something bad. Looks like her idea wasn't such a good one. On the other hand, the Undine is practically untouched. Great prize, and they desperately need the money. Okay, she said. Just be careful. You can't tell what killed them? We didn't get a good look at Morstead, Machado said. Veselov looks like he was, instantaneously burned or something, all dried up and ashy, crumbling at the slightest breezy. But there's no sign of fire in the main controls. Everything's intact. Just this dust everywhere. For a while, there was silence, interrupted only by the intermittent remarks of Lee Tang and Machado, who were trying to revive the Undine systems. Annetta pondered what had happened, looking at the inexpressive surrounding landscape. A desolate plain with lifeless, sullen, rocky spurs on the horizon. The local sun was at its zenith, and a shivering haze was visible over the heated ground. There was, unfortunately, nothing exceptional in the death of the merchants. Occupational hazard. When traveling around the little explored corners of the galaxy, trying to find something valuable to get a profit, you will get into life-threatening situations sooner or later. True, Morstead had great experience and a remarkable sense of danger. Otherwise, he wouldn't have been able to stay in business for a good 4 decades. But if you play this game long enough, you are bound to finally make a mistake. Something suddenly caught Annetta's attention, snapping her out of her reverie. She quickly ran her gaze over the external view screens. There. In the trembling mirror of the mirage above the heated ground, about 100 paces from the ship, stood a man. Lee, Annetta said very calmly into the microphone. Are you still on the Undine? How's the situation there? Of course, we're here, Lee Tang replied, surprised. We are making progress with the equipment. All the batteries are dead, but running the main power core through the redundant starter circuits is possible. It looks like Morstead and Veselov shut down the reactor themselves. I don't know why they'd want to do that, but we can't ask them now. There's no crystal chip in the flight log slot. If we run the computer, there might be something on the central drive. Machado checked their quarters. Nothing was there to shed any light on what happened here. Why do you ask? Annetta stared at the screen. The human figure seemed to be shivering along with the haze, but was seen quite clearly. Never mind, I'm just checking something, Annetta said. I'll give you another 15 minutes, then come back, whatever the result. The silhouette on the screen seemed to float at the edges, swirling with darkly grayness, but it was clearly the outline of a human figure. Instead of a face or clothes, it had only fluid clots of dense fog. But the hands were clearly visible. One of them rose and froze horizontally, then lowered. Then it rose higher, pointing upward and to the side. The other hand twitched, moving away from the body to which it was pressed, but not far away, frozen in a slanting state. Then the arms assumed a different position, and another, and another. The whole thing was like a marionette puppet that someone was pulling by the strings chaotically, making it perform some strange dance. Or there was something here. Once, when she was still in the Space Academy, Annetta had attended a sailing club. The training facility was located on the only archipelago of Tethys, a planet entirely covered by ocean, and there were no other ways to relax, from studying and living in a barracks-type dormitory, except sailing. In addition to actually knowing how to handle sailing vessels, from a small skiff to a solid schooner. The students also studied the history of the sailing fleet, including the flag semaphore. Annetta took a pencil and began to follow the manipulations of the misty silhouette, painfully remembering half-forgotten figures. F, L, Y, A, W, A, Y. Fly away. The figure continued to wave its arms, and Annetta wrote down another word, danger. Then, the cycle repeated itself. Her thoughts were racing, unable to find answers. What is this? Some kind of crazy prank? An attempted contact by the locals? But why does it sound like a warning? Meanwhile, it seemed it was getting hotter on the planet's surface. The mirror-like rippling haze had already flooded almost the entire plane and seemed thickening, so it rose almost waist-deep to the human figure, then chest-deep. Annetta suddenly looked at the long-range view screen, where the far black dot of the Undine should have been visible, and saw nothing but clouds of gray haze. Shit. Lee, what's going on? Why aren't you talking? It's all right. We'll start the reactor now. Machado went to the power bay to check the fuses. Lee Tang's calm voice had a sedative effect on Annetta's nerves. We'll check the logbook, then see if we can get the engines running. Let the patrol figure out what happened to Morstead and his buddy, and we'll have the prize money for the ship. Annetta cast another glance at the screen. Even the rocky ridge in the distance had been covered by the streaming shroud, and only the head and arms of the misty signalman were visible. Hurry up, she said to Lee Tang. If the reactor doesn't start, don't waste time. Get to the crawler and return to the hustler. And leave such a juicy prize? Machado's snide voice broke into the conversation. No way. Lee, I'm all set here. One fuse fell out of its socket, so I put it back in. You're good to go. Roger that, said Lee Tang. Initiating warm-up. Okay, the primary circuits have been triggered. What do you get? Everything's normal. All the sensors are in the green zone. The process is underway. Initiating primary circuit, said Lee Tang. Good. Looks like it's working. Everything's ticking like new. Machado paused. Damn it. My flashlight's malfunctioning or something. Or is it my eyes? It's all blurry. Lee, did you mess up something in there? Maybe there's some kind of energy leak? No, of course it's not. There are no weak spots there to be leaking from. Wait. It's weird. There was a tension in Lee's voice. The output level went up at first, but then, for some reason, it froze and is going down. Maybe it's not warmed up properly. All right, the central memory bank is online. Looking for the captain's logs. Yeah, here they are. Let's see. Here are the last few. Oh, there's Veselov's signature too. Coordinates, orbit scan, landing, initial inspection. Why don't they write what they were looking for? That's odd. Ah, now that's interesting. Lee, I don't like it. Machado's voice sounded worried. It's like it's already under my visor, some sort of shimmering shit. I can't see the reactor, and my hands and feet are freezing as if the climate control of my suit is off. What are you doing there? Just a moment. It sounded like Lee was talking to himself, obviously having missed Machado's words, fully engrossed in reading the logbook. Wait a second, pal. I almost got it. Annetta, already agitated, opened her mouth to order the assistants to return to the hustler. But then Li Tong shouted unexpectedly, "Get out of there immediately! Do you hear me? Right now, run for the exit! Now!" An indistinct noise. Obviously, Li Tan was making some kind of manipulation on the main control panel. Then his voice again, already addressed to Annetta. "Captain, it's a trap. Do not approach the Undine under any circumstances. Beware of the haze and take off if we're not back in 15 minutes. I'm starting the reactor booster. The gray matter in the fuel cells will explode in half an hour. Hopefully, we'll be able to break away while it's warming up. There's no time to explain. Everything is in the flight log. I'll tell you when I get back. If I come back." Annetta stared helplessly at the swirling wall of gray mist closing in on her ship. She had just remembered that Morsted's favorite hobby was the history of sailing. How is he? Li Tang, who had just entered the wardroom, didn't answer immediately. First, he poured himself a tonic from the kitchen machine, sat in his chair, and took a big gulp. "Not good," he finally said. The cyber surgeon removed all the dead tissue, and the process seems to have stopped. But he is still very weak. Hopefully, the patrol's scientific committee award would be enough to pay for the prosthetics on the grace of God. Annetta sighed. Ever since their escape from the nameless planet that had nearly become their grave, she had been gnawed by a sharp sense of guilt. It was she who had led them into the trap that had now left Machado without arms and legs. She remembered how she and Lee had removed the sagging spacesuit from the unconscious pilot, how the sleeves and pants had spilled out fine gray dust that looked like volcanic ash. "So this is precursor technology after all?" she asked. Had Morsted finally managed to find something really big? He did. Li Tong nodded. God knows where he got the information from. There's nothing in the logbook. I heard he liked to dig into reports on Qatar technology and culture, and these guys, whoever they were, knew more about the precursors than we did. But he'd gone for some extra safety and took a partner for this one, Annetta said. Or maybe he just wanted to split the last prize with his best friend, Li Tong said. Vasilov was already talking about retiring too, and look where it brought them. Such a pity. Annetta looked at her assistant. Li Tong had always seemed to her the model of a researcher devoid of emotion, incapable of sentimentality. Well, you'd never know. I still don't quite understand what happened or how we managed to get away, she said. You said it was some kind of precursor battery, sucking energy out of everything it could reach. Why didn't it go after us immediately and not go for us later? Li Tang set his glass on the table. The precursor's technology is so different from ours that it's hard to even call it technology as we understand it. What we've encountered is beyond our knowledge. We don't even have the concepts to explain it. As far as I understand from Morsted's notes, the gray mirror haze you saw on the screens, which ate Machado's hands and feet, exists simultaneously in at least two realities, ours and another one inferior to ours by energy level. We know that the precursors knew how to manipulate realities. The mirror haze uses this energy differential to siphon energy from here to there, sort of a specialized form of Maxwell's demon. Why was it so selective, like killing Morsted and Vasilov, but not extinguishing the local sun, for example? And why didn't it attack us right away? Li Tang shrugged. This thing is at least 1 billion years old. Even precursor technology has a lifespan, and then it goes a bit down the drain. Moreover, it's a technology not a natural phenomenon. So I think its creators built the selectivity into it. Maybe they designed it as a weapon against biological species. I didn't have time to theorize on the Undine. I figured if I started an uncontrolled acceleration of the reactor, the haze would eat it first, as it was hotter, and that would give us time to escape. Lucky for us, your hunch worked. A wild guess. But it worked, yes. Annetta paused, gathering her wits. And the ghost of Morstead? How do you explain him? I don't know. Li Tong shook his head. Perhaps the haze isn't just a dumb demon that takes something in one place and pumps it into another. Perhaps it somehow retains informational images of those it siphoned, and now Morstead somehow exists in that lower reality, from which he can project into ours when the demon turns on. He was trying to warn us, Annetta said. My God, even in this nothingness, he was still trying to save us. Do you think there's any way to help him? Li Tang shook his head. All of this is so far beyond our comprehension that I don't even know what to latch on to. Maybe the patrol will think of something, though I suppose they'll be busy with a much more important problem. Annetta looked at the assistant carefully. She didn't like the anxiety in his voice. What problem? Li Tong looked directly into her eyes. This time, we've happened to stumble upon a relatively picky demon. What if someone wakes up one that consumes everything,